showtime. Welcome to the show. I'm Brent Holland, and welcome to Night Fright. Tonight, folks, settle in. Get the coffee going, get the tea going, get a nice warm cognac going, because I got a sore throat tonight, folks. Settle in that comfy chair. We're going to take you on a terrific ride with a new young writer. Her name is Rebecca Rowe, and she's got a terrific book out. Just let me read something off the back. The book is called Circle Tide, by the way. When Noah returns to the city to help his brother, he is caught up in a brutal murder. To escape the authorities and clear his name, he plunges into a subterranean world, and that's the key. Rebecca makes up her own science fiction worlds, and they are full of twists and turns and characters right out of the deepest of imaginations, let me tell you. He plunges right into a subterranean world where he collides with knife-wielding monks, told you, a crew of oddball hackers, oh yeah, and smart intelligence, and we're going to get to that. These guys are wild, bent on his destruction. Enter Rika. Let me show a picture of Rika. Okay, guys, settle down. And we're going to get into that. Is Rika based on you? That's going to be one of my first questions, by the way. Mushi Grant, and I've just mispronounced her name, an alluring data thief, heavily in debt from getting cognitive enhancements. I told you this is going to be a web of intrigue, a web of imagination that makes up this world, this incredible world. It's 2150. It certainly is not 2012, and her neural nits are failing. Rika is given one last chance to prove herself. Solve Circle Tide, hence the name of the book. A mysterious fungus ravaging Earth's cities. Her investigations lead straight to Noah, and that's when the sparks fly, folks. And the sparks are gonna fly tonight. Strap in and hang on. Here we go.
There is a time to question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark. For paranormal and conspiracy radio. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Welcome, one and all. Welcome. Settle in. Get comfy. Get in your comfy chair. We're going to take you into a world of an imaginative young lady, a world that she has created in the era of 2150. A couple of heroes and heroines are out to try and solve the Circle Tide fungus that is encapsulating the whole world. And I want to welcome Rebecca Rowe right to our show for the very first time, and definitely not the last, because she's got a whole wealth of ideas for new books as well. Circle Tide, a novel. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us.
Oh, it feels great to be here. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna hit you with that question that I said at the outset right away. Rika, is that you?
Well, that's very kind of you.
See the picture, guys?
No, actually.
That took my eye, I have to admit. Call me a pig, that's fine. But
Well, that's a big compliment. No, actually, the artist is David Willicom, and I've never met him, but he's the artist for both my first novel, Forbidden Cargo, and the second one, Circle Tide. And he read the book and was inspired by how she seemed to him, and that's what he came up with.
That's a nice way to put it, inspired. Have I shown you that picture yet, fellas? Trust me, that's worth the price of admission alone. This is a great book, folks. Let's get into this imaginative world. What goes on in your head to create a world like this? I was so intrigued. Every time I turned a page, there was something new being set out for us and would carry us along the narrative. But there was, I don't know, something special and new about the situations you put the folks in, and also I guess the era, what made you go in and create this world, and what do you draw upon? There's two questions there. What do you draw upon to create a world like this? What is your reference?
Oh, that's a really difficult question. I've been very influenced by other science fiction authors.
It's a hard reference because most folks I have on here do research, so it's based on somebody's past research or something. But you're pulling something right out of the air that's brand new. So, again, how do you draw upon a reference like that?
Well, I guess that's an excellent question. One of the hardest to answer, I think. I think one of the things I do is I do a lot of research. There's a lot of, magazines and so forth out there. I talk to a lot of astrobiologists. They're friends of mine and so forth. Boulder's one of the best places for talking. There's SWRI, there's the University of Colorado.
I should just interrupt you there. She's in Boulder, Colorado. Of course, we're doing this via Skype. And we were just in Denver not long ago. We flew into Denver. It's a hub, and beautiful. Folks, if you get the chance, go. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I'm partial to Colorado too, although there are many beautiful places. Where you live is gorgeous as well.
Merci beaucoup. Vous êtes très gentil.
De rien. Yeah, so I think a lot of it is doing my own research. I do a lot of research, and then I cross-check it with actually interviewing different scientists and so forth to make sure that it's fairly accurate,
Can you give us an example of something you cross-checked with, an astrobiologist?
Oh, okay. Well, when I was researching fungus, I talked to several different mycologists just to make sure that what I was doing was fairly, obviously I'm playing with things, right? And but at the same time, I just wanted to do a check and make sure that it was fairly accurate and so forth. So I did that. So things like that, I think, are obviously I'm pushing the envelope all the time. And once you get into bioengineering, things can change very quickly, and we're not sure what that future will be. But we do know already that a lot of experiments are happening today, and we're pushing viruses, we're pushing things beyond what they could be. I mean, that's in the news all the time, even in the standard news, like the New York Times, right? The bird flu was just pushed to another level, right? So I think we see things that, as an author, you can take just to the next level. You can take one step further, and so I think that's what I do. And then, of course, I have age-old influences like William Gibson and Isaac Asimov, Richard Adams. A Chemical for Leibowitz was one of my first reads in science fiction, by Walter Miller. It's brilliant.
Why science fiction for you? As I said, go ahead, please.
Well, that's a good question. I don't just read science fiction. I think most favorite books of all time is The Brothers Karamazov, which is, by Dostoevsky. And so he kind of captured at the time what Russian society was, what a dysfunctional family is, and then he had an amazing mystery at the same time, and a love affair, and all of those things all at once. So, and interestingly, there's a monk in there as well, right? With my favorite character in there is a monk. So yeah, I think that while I chose science fiction, and part of the reason was, when I was growing up, science fiction was very much, there were only a few select women who wrote science fiction.
That's interesting. See, I never considered that aspect.
Yeah, there was Susie Charnas. She did fantasy. There was Ursula Le Guin. There were a lot. There was just a handful that were just broadly available, right? Mm-hmm. And then all my others were Isaac Asimov and Heinlein, and all of who are wonderful authors. But to me, it seemed like a place that I could make inroads into. And of course, today there's Nancy Kress. There's a million. There are a lot of other science fiction authors like myself who are women, but I think that also was kind of an internal challenge, because my favorite authors at the time when I was young were men. And I thought, well, I want strong female characters, and so I think initially that it was a favorite genre of mine, and it also one where I thought could be better represented.
It's funny you mentioned that, because as I was growing up, I was so tired of the stereotypical woman screaming and yelling consistently and panicking and relying on the big, strong male. I was tired of that. I grew up with a single mom, and I know that's not the case at all. And I was so happy to start to see strong women coming forward, and I'm glad you were part of that. Just let me tell folks who we're speaking with. We're speaking with Rebecca Rowe. Is it Rowe or Rowe?
Row. Like row your boat?
Row your boat. Rebecca Rowe has a new book out called Circle Tide. It is a science fiction novel. It will transform you folks into the future. It will take you on a ride. Like I said before, every time I turned the page, there was something new that I was going to be involved in, something new that I hadn't thought of. There's all kinds of science fiction characters in this, but it's formed in reality as well. The potential for something like a circle tide, which is a fungus that is starting to encapsulate and destroy the world. There's a potential for that in this present day as well. So there's it's kind of a metaphor. It's set in the future, but folks, it's something you can relate to very, very well, and you can let your imagination fly. And that's the important thing. This show is all about new ideas and esoteric thought, and that's something I think that with all the reality TV shows out there and things of that nature, I think that's something that gets lost sometimes. And I'm so happy to have this guest on our show tonight. www.nightfrightshow.com. As always, click on tonight's guest's book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order it from the comfort of your own home. And we're in the middle of the winter right now, and it's cold out there. You got the fire going, and you got your cognac going. Great book to read. Wonderful book to read. Let's go back into some of the characters here. Let's start off with Rika. Now, I gestured before, I made a joke. Was that based on you? But can we talk a little bit about Rika, how you make this character? I suspect it's probably a composite character. Do you draw upon people you know, astrobiologists, physicists perhaps? How did you come to make this character Rika? Oh, a stumped question.
Difficult question, yeah.
It's because, I'll tell you, there's a lot of students watching the show. And they're budding writers, and they have, students today are just wonderful. They have this great energy and a desire to learn, to know. And I feel sometimes perhaps what they're being shoved down their throat in universities and colleges, etc., may not be apropos for today's generation. And when you have a writer of your stature on the show, I like to draw upon your processes, if you will, so that they might be able to be inspired in the same way that you were inspired by your authors that you were reading when you were younger, in the same sense. I hope that makes sense somewhere along the line. Did I mention I have a sore throat and a bit of a fever? Maybe the fever's bigger than I think tonight.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I guess what I would say is that Rika is definitely, like you say, scrappy and gritty, and comes from a family where she's basically just has her mom, and then she loses her mom, and so not during this is all before the story begins. So she's basically on her own and very young, so she's kind of had to make it. And one of the things I wanted to deal with, and I think this is something that we may see as we go forward in the future, we definitely see problems today with this, is just that as humans, we are at a disadvantage if we can't buy the latest technology, if we can't get the latest, the iPhone and all of these other things that allow us to do so many different things. Skype. So we're already seeing a divide between people who have and people who don't have things, right? And so we see a situation where suddenly if you have the technology, well, then you can get a certain type of job, and if you don't, well, it might be a lot more difficult. If you haven't grown up with computers and And I know that's hard to believe in our society, in such a wealthy society, that everybody wouldn't have access to computers.
Good point.
But a lot of people don't.
That's right.
And even young people. So they're not getting exposed. And yet other people children who are exposed are exceeding their parents and their abilities, right? Mm-hmm. Because their exposure is so young and they're so good at it. Well, in the future, we expect to be able to do bioengineering, in which we can eradicate some diseases that are genetic and so forth. Well, what about when it comes to intelligence? What about when we can actually control certain levels of intelligence, or engineer ourselves so that our next generation thinks that much more quickly? And Rika happens to be one of the few who doesn't get genetically enhanced. So she's desperate. At the beginning of the novel, she's basically she's gone and gotten cognitive enhancements just to be able to get a job, right? And she ends up being, in some ways, faster than the people around her. She has access to more information, but things start to go wrong. Her cognitive enhancements start to fail. So for her, she has all this opportunity because she makes this choice, but the choice has consequences and a huge cost to her and her own identity.
Hold that thought for a second. I want to come back to that. I want to talk about humanity, how she doesn't lose her humanity even with the cognitive enhancements, and I think that's an important part in the book. Folks, we're talking with Rebecca Rowe, like row your boat, as I was informed before. Her book is called Circle Tide, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. You're just joining us, settle in. This is a wonderful story set in the future. We're talking about all the characters that she's made up. This is set in 2150. There's a fungus called Circle Tide that is starting to engulf the Earth and destroy the Earth, if you will. There's characters in here called SIs, which are, help me out here, I can't think.
Smart intelligence.
Smart intelligence, which obviously, folks, no. That's all I can say. No, not
That's
tonight.
Not true.
Oh, God love her. Isn't she sweet? Denver, Colorado, by the way, folks. Go down there and have some fun. www.nightfrightshow. Just click on the book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. Wonderful, wonderful story, folks. Full of new, fresh ideas. And that's something that you can grasp upon and just go wild with esoteric ideas. I love this stuff, folks. I love it. Circle Tide. Let's go back. Now, you talked about cognitive enhancements. Obviously, I need a few, but let's talk about Rika. She doesn't lose her humanity. And, whenever I think of any type of manipulation, either to the genome or to human beings or something like that, I always right away see it in a negative sense. How do you see this in not only Rika, but perhaps as a moral issue that is going to be coming up more and more? As I had Dr. Collins on my other show, the Brent Holland show, who broke the genome. An incredible guest, but he's very, very extremely religious. And I asked him straight. I'm just giving an example in context here, folks. Here's the fellow that broke the genome, and I said, and he's very religious. And I said, "Is this the blueprint that God would have made for human beings?" He said, without a doubt, unequivocally. Do we touch that blueprint that God has, quote unquote, put in place for us? How do you feel about that? These moral issues that are going to come up more and more. Yes, that is hugely problematic situation for everybody, because the thing is that morally, yes, it would be nice to stay fundamentally human, right? Mm-hmm. Not to make certain types of changes. The problem is that once, and this has kind of been proven throughout history, once we have a technology, whether certain groups of us decide, no, we're going to legislate against that and it won't happen. If we have the ability to change things, as humans, we're so curious, and we're so and we're also driven by monetary gain and other things. Greed. Greed is good. No, from that movie Wall Street. What's his face says that? Yeah, yeah. Mike Douglas. It has its benefits, but also the downside is that I think that while there may be legislation, once we have that ability to do something, there will be
there will be some among us who do it, who take the next step. And I think just like with any other technology that we've adopted, there will be some horrible things that happen, some terrible things. But if we can get beyond that, we may be able to find some benefits.
I guess the fear is, I'm sorry, I was going to say, I guess the fear is, Rebecca, that we can't control it. Once we unleash this Pandora's box of new information, it's going to lead to other roads and other possibilities. And how do we control it for the betterment of mankind and not the detriment? I guess that's the issue. I guess that's the issue facing us for just about everything, though, these days. As you said, greed is good to a certain degree because it drives us forward, right? The desire to create what is necessary for necessity's sake. But at the same token, when greed becomes it becomes a pervert situation. I haven't got the word right. What ends up happening is people suffer, and it's not right. So how do we control this? I'll give you a good example, and I want to stay on this line of thinking because during the Holocaust, Mengele, Joseph Mengele, did a lot of experiments on twins. Some of those experiments were successful and could actually make people's lives today better. The dilemma there, folks, is do we use this most evil way of extrapolating this information to make people's lives better, or do we just say no outright, that no, this was created during a heinous act and we don't use it? We have a moral dilemma there, don't we?
We do, and I think that as we go forward, there will be mistakes, there may be terrible things that happen, but I think that the temptation to make things better or to change things will be so great that as long as we can survive our own, our own creations,
yes,
and that's a big if, that we may be able to transcend some of the problems and put in place controls that are at least protect us somewhat. An example of that is, say, there are things like Huntington's disease and other diseases, cancers, that if we could eradicate those, that would be hugely beneficial to the human race.
Absolutely.
So those kinds of advances, if we could actually genetically predispose people to not have these types of things, well, that's something all of us would agree, probably anyone would agree, that's a huge benefit.
I completely agree with you because I was joking before. I was saying that I hadn't been sick in 5 years, and then I went for a flu shot. And folks, I've been sick twice in 2 weeks. But we do give shots to our children so that they don't get polio, so that they don't get all these horrible diseases. So if we're manipulating the children at birth, maybe it could be morally acceptable somewhere to make the same type of decisions before birth. So, to eradicate these horrible, horrible diseases and make a better quality life. That's a possibility. Yeah. Folks, Circle Tide. All these things are in between the lines in Circle Tide. It's written by Rebecca Rowe, and easy way to get it, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover, as always, with all our guests, and just order the book from this comfort of your own home. And as I always say, tonight is a perfect night for that. Great book. Going to take you on a great journey and make you think outside the box. Let's continue now, if you don't mind, with some more of the characters, because I want to set up the characters so people go and get the book. Let's talk about Noah. Now, right away, when I hear Noah, is my favorite biblical character in the whole Bible. Probably because when I was
too.
Is it really? Because when I was in Sunday school, my mom taught Sunday school. There was something about the animals, I guess, that all the little animals, 4 or 5 or 6, whatever. It wasn't so much Noah, I guess it was the animals. Is there a biblical connotation there with his name?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just very loosely referenced, right? Just because he's such a prominent figure in the Bible.
Sure
and in this book, of course, I am playing on that a little bit. So, actually, interestingly, my dad named me after Rebecca in the Old Testament. So
in the Torah, sure.
Yeah. So, so yes, it is, but only very loosely, right? So.
Do you want to tell folks the history of Rebecca very quickly, just so that they know that you're named after this wonderful, powerful woman?
Oh, I'll let you do that.
Oh, God. Okay, Rebecca was a powerful woman in the Old Testament. Read up on it. There you go. Okay. Because I just realized what I said, it's going to take us right off. And she's just a very, very strong biblical woman. Saved... she was dealing with Cyrus and not Cyrus, Darius, one of the Persian kings. Anyways, I'm mixing it up here, folks. But check out your Bible. Go to Sunday school. All the more reason why you should pay attention in Sunday school, or if you're studying Torah. All the more reason you should pay attention, and not just think about the animals as I did with Noah. Now let's go back to Noah. Boy, that was a skid mark. Okay, so there's a bit of a biblical connotation there with him. He's a rich guy. Why did you make him a rich guy?
Well, because I wanted to show both the kind of the divide between the uber wealthy and the other end, the other spectrum, people who are landless, who may or may not live above ground. Undergrounders play a big role in this story. So I wanted to show that extreme and also show the two different lives that people can live and how they intersect. Because Noah and Rika intersect because of two terrible things that happen, and they're kind of thrown together, and they're very different types of people, and how they come to know each other and try to solve a mystery and circle try how they try to anyway.
And right away you've built in a chemistry between the two. Talk about a love-hate relationship. Now, I don't want to give too much away, but it gets pretty steamy in parts. And I'm not talking about the steam from the ground, folks, because there's plenty of that too. Circle Tide's the name of the book. www.nightfrightshow. I'm going to hold it up, but there, as always, there's going to be a picture. Let me just see. I think it's over here. One of the sites it's going to be on, and www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover and order the book. Undergrounders, there's above grounders. You've got these two opposite characters, but there's a common thread between the two, and that is to attack this circle tide fungus that is encapsulating the world. The year is 2150 if you're just joining us. Settle in, relax, lots of time left. We're not even halfway. This is a story, folks, that is going to just enthrall you. It's going to captivate you completely as you go through the story. Every time, as I said, I turn the page, I was thrust into a new dimension, if you will. Not a dimension, the fifth dimension or anything like that, but a new geographical location, things I hadn't thought about for sure that are probably going to take place in the future. And of course, there is this time constraint also. Can they save the world in time? And that's important as well. Let's talk about SIs. Can we?
Smart intelligence.
Oh, yeah. Man, yeah. Let's go there. Can you tell me where this came from? How did you pull these guys out of the far reaches of your mind and out of thin air? What goes on in her mind is very scary, folks.
That's actually very close to home, because another thing I do besides writing science fiction is I'm very involved in thinking about where the internet is going to go and what what our next spaces are going to be in terms of augmented reality. And so that's also a component of Circle Tide and Forbidden Cargo, which is the first novel.
I've got that crispy stuff back.
Oh, okay.
Can you just pull out your headset and plug it back in? We'll see if that'll rectify the situation quick enough. Want to try talking again?
Did that work?
It certainly did, huh?
Oh, excellent.
Skype is funny. It's got, and in 2150, perhaps Skype will finally have it together. I'm sorry.
That's right. But maybe we won't be able to afford it. It'll be too expensive.
Just the rich guys will have it.
Yeah.
SIs.
Yeah.
I like these guys. Let's talk, as I said, let's tell folks where this came from. I mean, this just blew me away when all of a sudden these characters were introduced.
So smart intelligence, yeah, they're Prometheus is the primary intelligence in this novel. And he actually makes an appearance in Forbidden Cargo as well. Although the two are not specifically linked, they take place 40 years apart. And,
tell folks about Forbidden Cargo, because a lot of people don't realize you have another book out as well.
Yes. Okay, so Forbidden Cargo takes place in 2110, and it's about what happens when we take human evolution into our own hands. And there's two main characters, Sashmu and Thesni, and they've been genetically enhanced at birth and raised on Mars as part of a secret operation to kind of modify the human genome. Well, so they are brought to, when the government on Earth finds out about them, they're brought to Earth to stand trial as evidence against their creators.
Very cool.
And so it's all about their story and how they try to get home, and how they're considered really an aberration of what it is to be human, because in 2110, of course, any kind of genetic modification is considered illegal and forbidden, but by 2150, that's completely changed. And so we've actually gone the other way, and it's so what I wanted to do is to write a story about what it is to do modification when it's not allowed, and then also mirror that with once society's accepted it, what do we lose in the process?
There you go. Prometheus. Yeah. Okay. Now, Prometheus is a mythological figure. Again, do you draw upon that for the name of Prometheus as well?
Yes, Prometheus in mythology gives man fire, and for that he's punished eternally by the gods, by Zeus, and
banished.
So this is Prometheus is a very, very strong, smart intelligence, or if we use terminology, that's what we say, that would be artificial intelligence. And his creator is Creed Zirkler, and in Forbidden Cargo you learn a lot about that. But in Circle Tide, he's already been created, and she actually gets introduced to him through her own abilities. So at any rate, he's a rogue at this point, and very, very able to circumvent the controls that are placed on artificial intelligence, and he does so in kind of unusual and dangerous ways.
He sure does. Isn't this a great book, folks? The book is called Circle Tide. I mean, it's got all these characters, all these geographical locations, undergrounders, and everything. It's going to take you on one heck of a ride. Wonderful book. Circle Tide, our guest tonight, Rebecca Rowe. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. We'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. I'm going to read from the book right now, if you don't mind. I've picked out a couple of passages, and this is from the beginning of the book, as you can see. "Yori!" she yelled and waited, and then as loud as she could, "Yori!" The rope moved ever so slightly. "I'm coming down," Rika said. She meant to be reassuring. Rika tested his rope secure and weighted down, so he must still be hanging there. She set up her own line and attached her ascender, oh yeah baby, on the far side of the door. Since she preferred not to slam into him on her descent, always a good idea, she headed down slowly. The building's sensors still showed him on all 3 floors, so she couldn't be certain precisely where he'd gotten in trouble. Now, here's where she describes a little bit of the fungus, Circle Tide. The shaft sides felt slick, like oil, as she inched her way down. The fungus had grown thick enough to narrow the space. Passing the 6th floor, she noticed a large protrusion that she took for Yuri. She hesitated, leaning against the wall of oily sponge and pivoting downward like an upside-down bat to get a better look. Perfect writing, just great. She could see an opening in the globular mess, a bit of sheer Anzughood, geez, I hope I pronounced that right, and the glint of an eye. Yuri, she said. She heard a grunt. I'll do the grunt. That's when she realized the fungus turned glue-like with prolonged contact. Her one foot had adhered to the wall. She struggled, and the black-green fungus engulfed her ankle. Now, folks, if you want to find out what happens in the next paragraph, buy the book. It's wonderful. Just wonderful. I'm going to read some more from the book before the hour is out. We're talking with Rebecca Rowe. Her book is called Circle Tide. It talks about this fungus that's starting to engulf the earth and threatening mankind. It's set in 2150. All kinds of characters like smart intelligence, Prometheus we were talking about. Just wonderful. And the way she has it, there's arcs in it all over the place where she mentions something and then a little bit later, and then, and it's true storytelling is what I'm trying to say. Esoteric ideas, full-blown, no restrictions, and that's what I like to see. And that's what the show's all about, is entertaining those esoteric ideas. www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. Let's go back into this wonderful imagination of yours. How do you coax these things out of your mind? Is there a process you use? I'm writing a book right now on the Kennedy assassination. I've let it out of the bag, folks. I've got a publisher interested. So what I do is, much to my wife's chagrin, is I lie in bed in the morning and I think. She said, "What are you doing? Get up, you lazy bum." And I said, "No, I'm thinking." And sometimes I fall back asleep. Okay, what? What is your process for writing?
I'm the same way. Sometimes I'll be driving and I have to pull over because I get this thought and I'm like, I gotta write this down. So I think that inspiration comes at different times. If it's just right when you wake up, that's amazing, actually, Brent. That is very impressive.
Oh, God, love you.
Well, it's true. That is impressive because for me, nothing comes to me before I've had a cup of coffee.
Sometimes I think I should get a shirt fueled by coffee. A little bit of apple pie and ice cream too.
Ooh, yummy. That sounds really good. So I think for inspiration, I'm also a runner. So a lot of times, if I'm stuck, I always make myself, every day I make myself sit down and write, just as an exercise in discipline. So sometimes I don't come up with anything, or I just write a poem, or, I write something completely that I will throw away and it's completely useless, but I make myself sit down and write every day.
It's a discipline, isn't it?
Yeah, and otherwise it's easy just to get away, and several days have passed, and the daily routine is taking you away from the things you really need to get done, and that's your writing. So I always set aside a certain amount of time, and it can be in the morning or in the middle of the day or at night. It just depends. But I always make sure I sit down and do that. One thing I notice, though, is if I don't run or do something that makes those endorphins go, I get stuck.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that really helps me. And one of my favorite authors is Haruki Murakami, and he was one of my favorite authors long before I learned this. But I found out he came out with a running book, of all things. He doesn't write anything about running, but he came out with a book about running. And since I read all his books, I read that book. Although normally I wouldn't read anything about kind of sports type stuff, but this really took me. It kind of fit with how I thought. And one of the things he does before he starts the next big project is he trains really hard. He trains until he's in the utmost shape, and then he starts his project. And he feels like when he is just in that moment, then he can do his best work. Now, I'm not that extreme, but But just to get those things endorphins.
Do you gravitate towards a certain time of day to do your writing? See, I'm very nocturnal. Again, much to the chagrin of,
No, I get that. What's really weird is that I'm a very late night writer and I'm a very early morning writer, which means I really like to take naps in the afternoon, which I don't always get to do. Because afternoon, I'm worthless. But I always have my cup of coffee before I try to write anything.
Absolutely. Have it going, and just milk it. That's what I do, too. Circle Tide we're talking about tonight, folks. This is a book out by Rebecca Rowe. Easy way to get it, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. It'll take you right to a spot where you can get it from the comfort of your own home. I'm going to read some more. I'm just looking at the time. Oh, we got lots of time. Got 20 minutes left. But I'm going to read this anyways. Okay. Oh, sorry for the break there. She sat down beside him and rested her head against his arm. I've come for the datasphere. Not many people have someone like me who can extrapolate their future for them and give accurate advice, Prometheus said. He's the SI, by the way. Most people have parents, Rika said. Parents? Prometheus waved the comparison away. I've analyzed the potential outcomes. Sebastian and Noah are no good for you, and one is worse than the other. Prometheus! The curator held up his hand. I won't mention it again. Just promise me you won't destroy Jaw City for either man. Jaw City, you gotta love it, folks. There's all kinds of places like this. Just, great places to take your mind and just go on that journey. Destroy Jaw City? Jaw to keep my identity intact. Precisely, Prometheus said, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out the datasphere and held it over the palm of her hand. May I tell you a secret? And if you want to know that secret, folks, you gotta buy the book. Night Fright Show, Circle Tide, Rebecca Rowe is there we go. Night Fright Show, Rebecca Rowe. Okay, anyways. Too much coffee, folks, and you see what happens? Let's go back into the novel. Now, I without giving anything away, what was the hardest part in the book for you to create? The hardest, in other words, to make it all come together. What was the hardest part for you?
That's an excellent question. Well, let me just mention you were talking about alternate worlds and kind of worlds within worlds.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I really loved about, I was just on the Brent Holland show group, I was looking at the different shows and
Night Fright Show, but you can go to the BrentHollandShow.com too.
Yeah, the piece with Colonel Darling.
That's Brent Holland Show.
It was almost, how reality can be stranger than fiction sometimes.
Yeah, he's actually going to make an appearance on the Night Fright Show too in the next few weeks.
I can't wait to see that because it was just very, very interesting because there's just this world within worlds, right, that we don't really know about as average citizens. So.
Can I just tell you a little bit about Colonel Darling, folks, was 9/11. He was in the president's bunker. Right beside Cheney and Condoleezza Rice, and he tells that whole story the whole day from start to end, and it's going to break down a lot of the myths about George Bush and how he was stunned or something. Nah, he wasn't stunned. Anyways, hang on a few weeks. He's coming on the show. I've spoke to him again, and he's more than willing. He's just up to his neck. Colonel Darling used to fly the helicopter, Air Force, not Air Force One. What was the helicopter called? It has a name also, to bring the president to Air Force One. He was part of that whole entourage every time the president moves. And on 9/11, he just happened to be in the White House, ended up in the bunker, president's bunker. Fate. That's all it was. Answering phones and going through all those decisions because the outcome wasn't set. Don't forget, they had to make those decisions. They were coming fast and furious, and I've spent far too much time on this subject, and I apologize to Rebecca for it. But please continue.
No, I think that was just a fascinating piece, and I'll be waiting for the next one. That was really, really interesting. So at any rate, yeah, I thought that kind of our realities are so tenuous, and that piece just really highlights that. It also highlights worlds that we just don't know anything about, right? As an average person, until someone highlights it for us, So for me, the hardest part about writing Circle Tide, which part? It's interesting because I wrote different parts at different times, and then it all seemed to come together. And then, of course, at the end, it was going back and I always write one draft and then I write a second draft. That's just kind of how my mind works. Well, first I outline it and then I don't do anything according to.
I was going to offer you a teaching job, but not anymore.
I outline it, and then I get like a third of the way through the outline. I'm like, this is not going to work, and then I don't follow it. But actually, I think that outlining process has always been very important to me, even though I don't exactly follow it. So I outline it, then I go back and I violate the outline because I don't like rules.
Violate it.
And then I write the whole draft and then I rewrite it one more time. And then that's before even the editor sees it, right? So,
do you have these different worlds in mind as you're creating your first draft? Or do you have to create them in order to create a vehicle to move the narrative along? Geez, I hope that was clear too.
That is clear. So I think, yes, they already exist before I have the plot in my head, how I want it to go.
I see.
And then, of course, what I've outlined, which then it diverges from. And then I have these ideas that I think fit in with my characters and with who they are and where they want to go. And so, of course, I think as I get to know my characters better, then the book changes. So that's why when I go through my next draft, I go, no, that doesn't really fit. Rika wouldn't do that. And so that gets struck out.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's how it's kind of an iterative process for me.
So it's an organic, actual living thing growing process. Let's take one of those locations. I talked about Jaw City. Can you describe Jaw City? Not enough to give any of the plot away, but just enough to hook the folks to go buy the book. Just, the type of world that you've created here.
Yes, Jaw City is a city that exists in the virtual, which I call Novus Orbis, because it is so tightly New World, which is so tightly bound with our own world, because, of course, in 2150, virtual reality is basically augmented reality. So you can slip into the virtual and back very easily.
Yeah.
So Jaw City is a secret city that is known only to Rika and Prometheus, and it's a floating city. And it doesn't abide by the rules of, just like Prometheus, it doesn't abide by the rules it's supposed to. It
violates them, as you say. Yes.
Yes. So, Rika is doing lots of things that are under the radar and not within the legal parameters set out by our society in 2150.
Which makes a wonderful intrigue for the whole novel, folks, and the novel is called Circle Tide. Our guest today is Rebecca Rowe. She is all the way from Colorado. Where in Colorado again? Is it Denver?
Boulder, Colorado.
Boulder, I'm sorry.
But Boulder is just right outside. It's only 25 miles outside of Denver, and Denver's so spread out that basically you could just say Denver, but it's Boulder. I'm right up against the foothills.
And we flew out of there right across the mountains, folks. It is gorgeous. Oh, just stunningly beautiful. You live in a beautiful, beautiful spot. Easy way to get the book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. That'll take you right to a spot where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. That was a wonderful segue, Rebecca. Let's talk about MAM.
The MAM, the Molecular Advantage Machine. Well, basically...
Isn't this great? All this is packed in this book, folks. And it makes sense in the book, It's not just... it's not just descriptions thrown out there. It all comes together in one wonderful narrative and one wonderful ride. I'm sorry, ma'am.
So yeah, the MAM is kind of, if we think about today, there are inklings of the MAM now, in the sense that, there are ads for being able to turn your lights on and off and your heat up and down and so forth from your phone if you want to. You can have an app that you can download and do that. You can there's all kinds of things that are pushing us towards a more network society. Well, one day it's possible that everything we touch, everything we do is both monitored, and we can monitor it, and that we are monitored by others. And in 2150, the networks are all interconnected and information is shared, so you're constantly being watched, but you have a limited ability to constantly watch as well. So that's the MAM allows for that, and is basically a vast network of interconnected systems that are separate, but also they're sharing information and compatible, so that we have smart buildings that are self that have some AI intelligence to them, and also have an organic component to them. So that's kind of the MAM in a nutshell.
Folks, this is what I love about this book, is all these various things come together, intertwine in each other, and create this narrative and the details. But sometimes a book can be caught up in detail too much. This book doesn't do that. It just keeps moving at a wonderful, wonderful pace. It slows when it needs to, and then it just accelerates on the next page, and you got to hang on by the seat of your pants. The book, of course, is called Circle Tide. Rebecca Rowe is our guest. Tonight, you can get the book at www.nightfrightshow.com. Before we run out of time, I want to talk about edge science fiction and fantasy publishing, because this is a Canadian publisher, folks, and that's something that this show, I try to get as many Canadian, because it's a Canadian show, I try to promote as much Canadiana as possible. The reason for that is, as I harp on sometimes, is our national broadcaster just doesn't do that, and I think it's time, I'll be blunt, to end the CBC and spread that money out to private broadcasters like the broadcaster you're watching this show on right now. I think they do a much better job of promoting local Canadian artists, and God love CBC. I think the heady days of Barbara Frum are long over, I'm afraid. Even Hockey Night in Canada isn't the same anymore. I think TSN does a better job, and why should our tax dollars go to something that isn't doing their job? As a matter of fact, I'm a composer, most of you know. I'm going to cut this very short. They cut out all the Canadian suppliers and signed a multi-million-dollar deal with an American supplier. So now your tax dollars and my tax dollars, I wouldn't mind if it was a private company. I don't care, but I don't want my tax dollars going to pay for somebody that is my competition, and I'm struggling to make a living off my music. I am struggling, folks, let me tell you. Since the internet and pirating, I'm making a quarter of what I used to make, and I never made a lot of money. Okay, enough about that. Let's go back to the book. Let's talk a little bit about edge science fiction. And Nancy Kilpatrick, fans of this show who are aware, was on the show talking about vampires, and they put out all kinds of great books like this, and I'm going to get a lot more authors on, because two outstanding authors, two outstanding books. How did you hook up with Edge? Because you're in Denver.
No, yes.
Boulder, sorry.
Well, yeah, Edge is an amazing publisher, and it's interesting because I'm part of a writers group, which is all they've all been published by the big names in New York, and it's great, but they often have a lot of complaints because they don't get their books don't get enough publicity and all this stuff, Yeah. So I think that while Edge is a small publisher, they're amazing, and they have a lot of loyalty to their authors. And Nancy and I were just at World Fantasy Convention, and yeah, that was wonderful, and that was just back in November. And so, and anyways, I think that Edge does an amazing job of actually spending time with its authors and really promoting what they can to promote their authors. Also, they have a tremendous editors. Some of the luminaries, I think, in science fiction today. Matt Hughes was my editor, and he's a tremendous author himself. So
what's Matthew's last name?
Matt Hughes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he just was a tremendous editor and very just a great person to work with. So I think Edge, every year Edge puts out a book that I get as soon as I can get it, and that's Tesseracts. And it's all Canadian authors, and the editor is also from Canada. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing works. They're all a lot of fun and great stories. So I can't say enough about Edge. They've been great for me, and it's kind of funny how it happened for me, because of course what I did was I've been writing for a while. Mm-hmm. And I decided, well, I want to try to get a book published. And I went to a Clarion, which is a kind of a
Clarion.
boot camp. Yeah. Boot camp for authors. Mm-hmm. And it lasts for 6 weeks. And so I did this boot camp, and they said, well, one of the authors, Kelly Link, was really encouraging to me, and she's like, you really should submit your work. And she said, there's lots of different publishers out there who are going to go for something that's not just your standard SF story, and you don't write standard SF, you write more speculative stuff. So you need to try to, to go out and look for some really good ones. And Edge was one of the science fiction publishers who really likes unusual work. So
that's how you hooked up with them. Good for you.
I just submitted it. Yeah, I submitted it. It was the funniest thing, because of course Brian Hades, who actually
yes.
Read the manuscript. Well,
we've only got a few seconds. I'm sorry to rush you.
Okay. Well, anyways, he said that he liked that he was going through the slush pile, and that he had hundreds of these manuscripts, and that's what we call the slush piles, when you just get dumped in when nobody knows your name. So I was a nobody. So at that point, and so he saw Forbidden Cargo. He liked the title, so he said, "Okay, I'm just going to take this with me on a trip." Well, he had a layover, and he got caught, and the long flight, and anyway, he ended up reading the book because he had so much time, and he liked it. So he's like, "I want this book."
Muzzle tov. That's wonderful. I'd love to hear stories like that. Folks, our guest today has been Rebecca Rowe. A Circle Tide is the name of the book, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the book cover. We'll take you right to a place where you can order the book from the comfort of your own home. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for allowing us to enter your mind through this book. And what a mind it is, full of possibilities and full of great esoteric ideas, and I just loved it. I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. See you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You're listening to Night Fright, and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy radio.